Hey, oh, there we go. I know people are coming back in and we're getting started. I'm very pleased to announce the next episode of Between Two Cacti with Brian Korgel and our special guest, Jeff Miers from Amazon Web Services. He's the Global Director of Partnership and Alliances for Energy and Utility Business Units at AWS.
Close enough.
Yeah, close enough, he says. Jeff has told me that the most important credential I should make you guys aware of is that he is a Longhorn. And these guys are going to have a conversation about how emerging innovations and partnerships are helping Amazon reach their net zero goals. Perfect. So thank you.
Thank you. Welcome, guys. Thank you for having me today. I was hopeful that I would have the opportunity to come and sit with Brian and not talk about energy and Amazon, but talk about Texas basketball. But unfortunately, I don't have that opportunity today. I'm from Houston, so I was really hoping that the Horns would make the Final Four in Houston. I could attend the game there, but unfortunately, that's not happening. So, as she mentioned, my name is Jeff Miers. I work for Amazon Web Services based in Houston. I've been there about 2.5 years. I joined Amazon actually in the height of the pandemic, believe it or not. Prior to that, I spent 27 years in consulting with a company called Accenture, which I'm sure many of you have heard of. Graduated here in the early 90s from the mechanical engineering school, joined what was then Anderson Consulting, and I was one of those guys that thought he was going to spend a couple of years in consulting and then maybe go back and get an MBA. And 27 years later, I finally decided to leave the firm and took the opportunity to join Amazon. And the reason I did is part of the reason I want to kind of share a couple of slides with you, because Amazon it put a team together 3 years ago to focus on the energy and utilities industry. So we would define energy as being the oil and gas industry, the renewables industry, and of course the power and utilities industry, right? Recognizing at that point in time that there's a high degree of convergence happening among those three industries, right? And I put this slide up not because it's going to be any new news to anyone in this room, but I think everybody appreciates here kind of the growth in energy demand that is set to occur between now and 2050. Certainly a large portion of that will be attributable to the growth in new energies such as renewables, wind and geothermal and solar and other sources of energy, but hydrocarbons will continue to be an important part of the energy mix as we go forward. So we kind of look at it from the perspective of, from an Amazon perspective. When you really think about it, we're a little bit unique as a technology company, in that we're both a technology company, but we run a physical business, right? Amazon started as a book buying business and a book delivery business over the internet. So we have evolved quite dramatically, from those early days, and have as probably you all know, a massive global infrastructure, in place, a physical infrastructure that requires energy. It requires manpower. It requires, we have, as you probably know, delivery vehicles. We have trucks over the road. We have a fleet of airplanes that deliver packages between continents. So we have a need for energy, a significant need for energy. And we put this business unit together really as a way to help partner with companies that provide energy. So we work very closely with some of the biggest names in the oil and gas industry, and as well the utilities industry globally. So we'll talk a bit about that here as well. So, all of the things that are happening today in the industry, really, that slide sort of described a number of different dimensions of growth that are occurring and change that are occurring in the industry. And really, from our perspective, what it leads us to is a conclusion that it sort of plays, if you will, into the hand of Amazon or AWS, where in order for us to succeed at achieving, this energy transition topic, there's going to be new innovation that's required. And frankly, innovation is something that we take pride in at Amazon, that we feel like we do quite well. Again, you guys, I'm sure, are quite familiar with Amazon. If you're anything like me, your packages arrive at your house multiple times a day. As I mentioned a moment ago, our business operates a very physical business at a massive global scale, right? We move very quickly. And frankly, I think we're known for, the innovation that we bring forward. And a lot of that is, we have a process. We actually, at Amazon refer to it as the culture of innovation. And we've it's kind of hard to take a creative, innovative type of process and put an actual process, a rigorous process around it. But we've tried to do that. In fact, we use tools and processes that we refer to as working backwards. So we start with customer problems and we work backwards from customer problems to develop innovative solutions that meet the needs of our customer and meet the needs of the problem. So we've taken that sort of philosophy. And this is a terrible slide. I apologize for this. You probably can't read it, but we've taken that sort of approach to innovation and have now, in the context of this business that we've created, or this business unit that we have created, and have applied it to the oil and gas and utilities industry. So you can see our ambition, frankly, is to work across the value chain, all the way from seismic and processing and data gathering in the field, exploration activity, drilling and production, midstream and transportation, refining operations, all the way into power generation, including renewables, wind, solar, geothermal, et cetera. And then into what we're now thinking of as the carbon value chain. So we are very focused on bringing forward new solutions, working hand in hand with our customers and our partners to deliver solutions to the industry that solve some of the the biggest challenges that we all have in terms of getting to kind of a net zero infrastructure. So I know, Brian, you wanted to talk a bit about some of the things that we're doing from an Amazon perspective to achieve that net zero ambition. So why don't we start the discussion?
Awesome. Sounds great. Great.
I've been told to be careful because I guess these are real.
They're extremely real.
Yes. I won't pet it.
I have to be careful. I have to be very careful. Well, Jeff, thank you for joining me on Between Two Cacti.
I think this makes you Zach Gallup. I don't know who that makes me, but
probably someone famous. Yeah, there you go.
Not quite.
So I think Amazon was one of the companies early on in the whole net zero pledge. Certainly by the time I took over as Energy Institute director about a year and a half ago, it seemed like every company had a net zero goal. I don't want to throw UT under the bus, but UT should have a net zero goal. Maybe we'll come around to it. But Amazon has one, and it's a climate pledge to reach net zero carbon emissions by 2040. I remember talking to someone from Pepsi about their challenge meeting net zero, and I thought it'd be like transportation. And they're like, nope, got that covered. We have a path for that. And they were like, we know how to do heating beverages. Like, no problem. We have a path for that. What their main pain point at Pepsi was food snacks. So apparently heating, stuff in a fryer or something like that. So at AWS, what are your pain points? I mean, what are the things that keep you up at night when you think about net zero goal 2040, where you don't yet know how to solve those? I'm also curious about some of the things that we might think are real challenging, and you have that solved. I'd be curious about that as well.
I don't know what we have solved and what you think is challenging, but let's maybe rewind a bit. So your first part of your question really focused on what we refer to as the climate pledge, right? And there, back in, I think it was September of 2019, we at Amazon were one of the kind of the founding co-signers, if you will, of what we call the climate pledge, which is, as you kind of rightly noted, it was a corporate pledge across a number of different companies to achieve net zero by 2040. So 10 years prior to the Paris Agreement, right? And today, so I guess we're now about 3.5 years removed from that. There are about 400 companies. Pepsi, probably, I guess, is one of them that has signed this climate pledge. So we're, helping to drive sort of the corporate activity around, kind of rallying around this whole net zero set of objectives. So, I guess the question would be, what are some of the things that we're doing from an Amazon perspective to achieve that? I would tell you, this whole notion of net zero and sustainability, kind of cuts across all aspects of our business. One that's kind of near and dear to my heart is the work that we're doing in renewable power, right? So sort of in parallel, I guess you could say, with the climate pledge, we've also made a commitment to run 100% of our facilities, fulfillment centers, data centers, et cetera, on renewable energy. And our objective is to reach that objective by 2030. The reality is, at this point, we're actually in a very good position because we are forecasting that we will be there actually by 2025, which sounds, I keep thinking that's a long way off, and it's actually 2 years from now, right? We're approaching actually having 100% of our powering our facilities generated by renewable energy here in the not too distant future. And we do that, going back to my comments a moment ago, we do that in partnership with our customers, right? So a lot of this is publicly available. You can research this a bit, but we have renewable power purchase agreements in place with companies like BP, like Shell. In fact, this was earlier this week, maybe late last week, we had an announcement with Iberdrola utility over in Spain, where we will be the off-taker of 1.1 terawatt hours of power from 2 wind farms that are being built by Iberdrola in Germany, right? So we very much are focused across our business in finding every lever that we can pull, frankly, to reduce our own energy consumption, to promote the development of renewable energy. So when, for example, when we do an arrangement with somebody like BP or Shell, I mean that, or maybe even this Iberdrola, an announcement, to be frank, it gives those companies, when we commit to be the off-taker of power, gives them the financial capability to go and build the facility, right? They have certainty of demand, so they then now need to go build the supply. So we feel like doing those kinds of deals actually helps not just us achieve our ambitions, but helps the industry helps to promote this energy transition that's taking place and hopefully accelerate it to some extent. Other things that we do in our business, for example, we talked about the massive global scale that we have around the physical side of our business, the delivery side of our business. We early on, actually, so if I rewind a moment, so in conjunction with the climate pledge, we set up something unique to Amazon called the Climate Pledge Fund. So we set aside $2 billion of investment to invest in new technologies and companies that are driving the net zero ambitions. One of those investments that we made very early on was in an EV company called Rivian, right? And some of you may know of Rivian. We made an equity investment, but then also on the back of that equity investment, ordered 100,000 Rivian vans. So sooner, hopefully, rather than later, our delivery fleet, our last mile delivery fleet, will be electrified via this relationship that we have with Rivian. So we're looking at every aspect of our business and looking for ways in which we can bring in renewable energy and sustainability into the actual physical operation of our assets.
That's great.
I don't know if that answered your question.
Yeah. So, well, I mean, it's fascinating. So by 2025, your operations will be net zero?
That's the path we're on at the moment. No, sorry, to be clear, it will be powered by 100% renewable power. So our ambition still is 2040 for net zero, but okay, as a stepping stone to achieving net zero is 100% renewable power by 2030. And we're on path for 2025.
2025,
yeah,
okay.
Yeah.
I mean, everyone talks about the challenge of renewable power like solar and wind being intermittency. How do you address the intermittency of renewables to have 100% operation? Yeah,
that's an excellent question. So we're looking at a number of different alternatives. One fairly probably obvious answer is battery storage, right? So how do we secure battery storage at some of our fulfillment centers as a backup to like you said, the intermittency that occurs when the sun's not shining and the wind's not blowing. So that's one avenue. Another avenue that's kind of in its early days, but I think is shows some interesting promise is fuel cell technology, right? So can we? And I think there's an announcement that we've made with, if you guys are familiar with Bloom Energy, company out in California. We have installed Bloom Energy fuel cells at one of our data centers in Oregon. really for that purpose. And I think at the moment, those fuel cells are using natural gas as the energy source. But over time, as the infrastructure continues to develop, those fuel cells can be converted into hydrogen-powered fuel cells, right? So we'll have, very clean energy coming out of those fuel cells, in addition to the energy that we are able to secure from, solar farms and wind farms, et cetera.
Okay, fascinating. So one of the things that I was surprised by and I don't know the relationship really between AWS and Amazon. I assume are you the same company?
Yeah, I probably should have explained that at the very beginning. So AWS, for those that aren't aware, is really kind of an outgrowth of Amazon. So early, 2000s, as Jeff Bezos and team, began to look at the technology infrastructure that was required to run the business that they were building. Obviously, first with books and then into kind of online, retail. They sort of came very quickly to the realization that the massive amount of infrastructure that was required to run this business was infrastructure that could be utilized by other companies as well. So got in the Andy Jassy, worked very closely with Jeff, and they spun out effectively what is now called Amazon Web Services, which is really the technology side of our business. So think of it as the cloud computing side of Amazon. So we provide storage, we provide data storage in the cloud, we provide computational horsepower in the cloud. We are now, as a part of this path of innovation that we're on, we have begun to develop things like artificial intelligence, machine learning capabilities, computer vision. I mean, there's now close to probably 300 different technology services that we provide to companies via Amazon Web Services. But it all began really as an offshoot of the technology infrastructure that was required to run the business that Jeff was building, right? So yes, short answer is we're a subsidiary of Amazon.
Okay. Well, so I was reading, so Amazon's really active in hydrogen. What I was reading is that there's a plan to use green hydrogen for its like heavy duty forklifts and all of that.
True.
In its warehouses.
True. So I think the deal you're referring to is one that we struck with a company called Plug Power to produce, they're going to produce green hydrogen. I want to say that deal is somewhere on the order of like 11,000 tons a year that they're going to provide to us. So yes, you're right. So what we've done in our fulfillment centers is where we have forklifts, in a lot of warehouse operations, forklifts are powered by propane. We've converted all of our forklifts to run on hydrogen. So once you do that, you need to have a source of hydrogen. So we've struck the deal with Plug Power, and I think the estimates I saw indicated that we would, through that deal, be able to power like 30,000 forklifts around the world, and are also looking at using hydrogen as a replacement in some cases for diesel fuel to power our large over-the-road heavy-duty vehicles as well. So again, just yet another way. In other words, when you look at Amazon, there's not really one answer to energy transition. We have to pursue probably as many paths as you could think of to look for ways in which we can convert off of traditional carbon emitting, if you will, energy sources to those that are clean energy based. And that the deal you're referring to is actually I think it's an exciting one, right? Because when you think, and I'm guessing you guys have talked about this already this week, but hydrogen is obviously very early, I would say, in its stages of maturity and evolution. I think it shows great promise, but I would also say there's probably a tremendous amount of infrastructure that's yet to be built and that will be required for hydrogen to become a material part of our energy infrastructure. That's electrolyzers from the production standpoint, that's transportation through pipelines, that's storage capacity, and then of course you've got to have the delivery network that gets hydrogen into the hands of those that need to consume it. So
yeah, awesome. So questions from the audience, and our next thing starts at 1:45, so we're gonna go a little bit long here since we started late.
Easy questions only.
I think you just start talking and it'll eventually register.
Hmm? Yeah, so
Yeah,
the question was, with respect to the Plug Power deal, would Plug Power be co-locating their production facilities at our data centers? And the answer is, I don't know. They might, they very well could. I'm not enough familiar with the scope and scale of what those electrolyzers, look like, whether we have the physical, if you will, either floor space or land to accommodate that. It's an excellent question. So I should probably look into that. Yeah, but no, I think it's certainly, I have to believe it's part of the discussion, right? Because, again, and I think what you were alluding to is the fact that actually a lot of the infrastructure doesn't yet exist, right? To produce, move, store, et cetera, hydrogen, right? So why not just put if you can, put it as close to the point of consumption as you possibly can. And I have to believe that's a part of the answer.
Where are your warehouses located? So did you say you don't know the location of that project, or? Well,
I think in that particular instance, it's 11,000 tons of hydrogen. So that may be produced from multiple Plug Power facilities around the world, right? And again, the points of consumption for us are in our fulfillment centers and our warehouses, right? So I think in the United States we've got 90 of them, right? In fact, I'm going to visit one of them in Houston tomorrow. So they're all, you think of the hub and spoke network that exists to get a package from, where it's stored through a transportation network to your house. So we have fulfillment centers, we have delivery centers. You think of kind of the big massive ones, like the one I'll see in Houston tomorrow is, it's like 18 football fields long, right? It's 4 stories, like 18 miles of conveyor belts running through these things. If you have the chance, and I think you can schedule tours of these things. So, you should go check one out. They're really, really interesting, because what we've done, and again, this is a little bit of, the fact that we have a physical business along with the technology business gives us some unique opportunities to do, to use our own technologies, right? So when you go visit a fulfillment center, you can actually see, our robotics in action, right? So we have, these storage racks that are probably 12 feet tall, and they probably have 8 or 10 different bins in them, and they're moved around the facility by robots that slide underneath them, pick them up, move them to the point where they need to be used, and drop them off, and then the robot goes and does its next task. It's really super cool. So between that and the use of computer vision, and the way in which everything is kind of automated on the conveyor system, it's a pretty, it's a pretty interesting experience if you've had an opportunity to go visit one. And again, all of the technology that's in there is in some way runs on an AWS platform. It might be computer vision and artificial intelligence that we've developed for ourselves, or it might be, the algorithms that look at, which bin a certain item needs to be stored in, right? But all of that technology that's been developed is developed by AWS and runs in our cloud to power our own operations.
Okay, great. Question back there.
Going to be 100% on renewable power by a date certain. It's one thing to make a statement like that in an audience like this of knowledgeable people. When you make a statement like that to the general population, do you explain to them that this is a mathematical computation, that you don't have dedicated power lines from renewable sources to all your facilities, so you're getting the same electrons that everyone else is getting, which is a combination of coal, gas, et cetera, and everything? But you clarify that for people in the general population so that you aren't 100% on renewable power.
Well, it's not that we're not. We're pulling, in many cases, power from the grid, right? But what we've done is we've sourced the renewable power from a particular facility. Yeah, you're right. There's not, in most cases, there's not a direct, distribution line between that wind farm and this facility. In some cases, there are. So we can make that exact statement. But the fact that we're, in effect, purchasing or paying for the renewable power that's being put on the grid, that it's in effect, it becomes the offset that the electrons that we take may not have been generated by that particular wind turbine, but we know that there's that amount of renewable power on the grid because we paid for the construction of the facility. Interestingly, we've actually got one of those wind farms. We had an internal town hall about it 2 weeks ago or so, and our VP of sustainability was giving us sort of an update on the overall sustainability position of Amazon, and in the background on her slide, there was a picture of it's a Texas wind farm. Like, Texas wind farm, really? And so I Googled and looked it up, and sure enough, up in Scurry County, which I think is like northwest of Abilene and northeast of Big Spring, Amazon actually has built and operates a wind farm out there in West Texas. So it's interesting the amount of infrastructure that we're investing in the development.
Another question?
Hello. Hello. Appreciate
Yeah,
the
can you turn the
presentation.
mic on down here? Whoever's,
Click button.
we can't hear the mic. Okay,
Is it on now?
yeah, now it is.
Appreciate the presentation, and here's a question. So for the scale and the capabilities of Amazon and AWS, if we look at a parallel between, we'll say, consumer goods and oil and gas now has to, and hydrocarbons have to look at tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3 carbon. Isn't there a way, and shouldn't Amazon be looking at the source of manufacturing and raw products through the manufacturing cycle, whether it's domestic or overseas, especially China, and bringing all that here before you actually get it and distribute it and provide that information to the consumer so the consumer can have a choice?
Yep. So it's a good question, and I guess I'd answer that a couple of different ways. The first is in our business. So going back to your comment about oil and gas companies and scope 1, scope 2, scope 3, we are developing a solution, in our team that we refer to as Carbon Lake, and effectively it's a data lake based on AWS technology that's intended to track scope 1, scope 2, scope 3 types of emissions, right? Again, we are more of a data and a computing company, right? So there are a number of different partners that we work with that provide data. So if you guys have probably heard of many of these companies, but companies like Project Canary as an example, it runs on AWS, but it's actually performing measurement out in the field, looking at things like methane emissions and CO2 emissions from assets. So we capture that data from these multiple data sources and then use it as a means of reporting, right? Whether it's ESG reporting or analytics for where we're seeing spikes, let's say, in methane emissions in the field. And there's a number of different use cases that once we have this carbon data lake that we can build on top of to help manage and control, if you will, those carbon emissions. So that's kind of that's the action that we're taking as a business as it relates to the work with oil and gas and energy companies. Your question, though, I think was really about the retail side of the business, and can we provide almost a bit of a, my words, not anybody else's, bit of a disclosure to consumers as they buy products on the carbon footprint of the product that they're purchasing. Yeah, is that effectively the question you're asking? Yeah. So it's a good question, and it's probably something that we are looking at. I'm not deeply involved in it, so I can't really comment on whether or not we're doing that. But I can assure you that with the focus that we have on sustainability, and particularly scope 1, scope 2, scope 3, that those are things that that we take very seriously.
Maybe one more question. So I have I'll do the last question then. So, so it's really exciting. AWS has this going to be at net zero. It sounds like by 2030. I think the general public then wonders, why doesn't everyone just be net zero by 2030? So yeah. What are the challenges for every company reaching? Why can't everyone reach net zero just like Amazon in 2030? Or 2050 even?
2040 is for net zero is 2040 is the target. Every company is unique, right, in terms of the carbon footprint that they have. And I know there's a lot of effort and energy and focus being placed on within each business. How do we eliminate to the extent we possibly can the CO2 emissions that not just our company, but I think many companies that are taking this climate pledge quite seriously are doing. So the more companies that we're able to enroll in this sort of climate pledge activity, I think the more emphasis and momentum we can build around getting to a corporate environment that is focused on net zero by 2040. we feel like we're doing our part. At the moment, we are going back to the comment actually about renewable energy, we at Amazon now are the largest corporate purchaser of renewable energy in the world, right? We say corporate, and I don't exactly know why we say corporate. I mean, maybe we're differentiating ourselves from governments, but as it relates to companies, we're the number one purchaser of renewable power in the world at the moment. And that's, so we're hoping to continue to use that as a means of driving the industry, right? So, our focus on buying renewable power helps other companies invest in the development of renewable power sources that then benefit kind of society in a broader way. So, so we feel like we're doing our part. There's a lot of work left to be done to get to net zero.
All right, great. Thanks, Jeff. So I'm gonna turn it over to Nora, but we've got our next talk at 1:45. So if you need a quick couple